Hey, Devin, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I hear you, Tim.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for giving me an opportunity just to say a few brief words. Just wanted to thank everyone for joining the session today. I'm sure it's going to be a great and informative session. Just want to also thank our brothers and sisters from NSBE. Just really appreciate the collaboration that we have between BDPA and NSBE, and just look forward to all of us continuing to go through this entrepreneurial journey together. Thank you. And Devin, as always, I appreciate you and all that you do to make these sessions possible.
Appreciate that, Tim. Always good to have our national president join us on the BDPA side. And I know Dr. Worthy sends her best wishes as well from NSBE. Chris, any opening words you would like to say on behalf of NSBE? And we have Russell coming in now as well.
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to say thank you everyone for showing up for the event tonight. Not tonight, for today. We greatly appreciate it, having your interest and hearing from Mr. Brandon Rule on the topic today. Be on the lookout for the rest of the program if you signed up. Thank you, BDPA, for the partnership. Thank you, Devin, with everything we're juggling from the speakers and stuff like that. I'm looking forward to the discussion. So thank you all.
All right. And Russell, I see you in. Any words from you, Russell, before we get started?
Sir, let's get started.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I'm Devin Jenkins, and I've been partnering with Christopher Small and Russell Marzette to bring you this entrepreneurship from idea to launch initiative. So this is a partnership between BDPA, Black Data Processing Associates, and NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers. And we wanted to extend an opportunity for our organization's members and those connected to us to have the opportunity to take their business ideas and see them materialize into something real and tangible. So we may not be able to make sure you're going to be $1 million business by the end of the year, but we can at least give you some tools to get you started in the right direction. So this is one piece of that program. This is our virtual speaker series. And this is our initial series with Brandon Rule of Rule Enterprises, LLC. And I'll let him tell you a little bit more about his story here shortly. So we'll have a few more of these coming up. We're planning for our next one in about 2 weeks. Be focused around paths and barriers from idea to market. So be on the lookout for more details around that. In the chat, we'll share the link if you want to be a part of the overall experience. So this will be the speaker series. We'll have a session coming up at the NSBE convention, March 26th, for those who are interested in going through the full program to present their elevator pitches to some of our entrepreneurs. And then we plan to have a boot camp type of program throughout the summer to really get some hands-on assistance as you work through business plans and a pitch deck. And then ultimately we want to culminate this round of the program at our BDPA conference in August, which will be held in Atlanta, where you would present your pitch. And then we will give some nice incentives to those who complete that to continue on with their business efforts. So if you're interested in that, be on the lookout in the chat. Christopher Small will share the link to register to complete our intake form for that program, and we will communicate with you more about the overall program. But overall, these sessions are open to the public, meant to be informative and give you some tools to take with you. Whether you want to start a business or not, I think you'll find it valuable. So that's going to be my spiel. I'm going to be quiet now, and I'm going to turn the floor over to our esteemed guest today, Mr. Brandon Rule.
Esteemed, oh, that's a great adjective. Thank you, I appreciate it. I was putting that on my post. No, I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, especially the group that put this together. I think it's very important to. Should I share let me share my screen as well. I'm sorry. So yeah, I don't have, I'm sorry, 1 second. Cool, yeah, I'll just share this. So yeah, I think it's very important to have these conversations. I think it's important to have different perspectives. You know, what I'm about to say here today isn't law. I think everyone has their own opinion, but one of the things that we can do is look at best practices of entrepreneurs across sectors and to figure out how to incorporate them into your own. So me personally, I'm Brandon Rule. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Full disclosure, Devin Jenkins is a very, very close friend to mine, one of my closest friends in the world. So I appreciate him for even thinking about me to do this. But I hope to be able to give you all something of importance and leave you with a few things to consider as you go on to take part of this entrepreneurial journey. So mine started many, many moons ago. I'll give some background on myself. So my parents are high school sweethearts from Chicago. They moved to LA directly after high school. They then had me in Los Angeles. So I was born in LA and I lived there up until I was 5. And when I was 5, we ended up pretty much losing everything. And I was in an earthquake, and that was the first time that I truly experienced like homelessness and things like that. Are we recording this session at all?
Yep, we're recording.
Okay, cool. I'll just make sure. All right. That was the first time where I like experienced homelessness, and it came full circle later in life when I started to really do the work in which I was doing. But moved to Milwaukee because that's where my grandfather was. Lived with him for a few months. Then we got on our own feet. Lived on the northwest side of Milwaukee. Then we moved to the south side, which was interesting because the south side was predominantly Hispanic. If you know anything about Milwaukee, it's one of, if not the most segregated place in the country. And all of my friends who were Black would always make fun of me for living with different people. So I never really saw a melting pot. I never really saw culture. And growing up through the Milwaukee public school systems, I ended up getting a scholarship to go to Marquette University. Some friends and I ended up doing that, where most of us became members of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, which is the fraternity I'm a part of, and how really Devin and I really got and expanded our relationship. So yeah, went to Marquette, started studying. I thought I was going to be a doctor. I'm like, yeah, I want to be a doctor, and I want to be, I like sports. So I'm like, why not try to be a physical therapist? So I wanted to try to do physical therapy, but my grades were terrible. Chemistry and bio was atrocious, and it just wasn't for me. So then I ended up pivoting. I was undecided for a while. I was bumping my head. I figured out that I was pretty good in sociology, so I just made that my major. And then really like junior year, probably even after that, the dean of economics reached out to me and said, hey, have you considered ever being an economics major? And I'm like, no. He's like, well, you're doing pretty good in it. Would you consider it? I'm like, sure. I mean, it's kind of like business, right? So I ended up changing my major to economics. I moved sociology to my minor. And I say all that to say, understanding capitalism and really opportunity cost, and as it relates to time, like some of those core things, core pillars of economics really lends itself well to the work that I'm doing today. But pairing that with sociology and understanding how people fit within society, right, is really important as well. So when I talk about the businesses in which I'm doing, it'll all kind of come full circle. So the first company I launched was Rural Enterprises back in like 2012. And I had no clue what I was doing, but I wanted to be a developer. When I switched over all of these majors, I didn't know really what I wanted to do, but I ended up taking a course called the ACRE program, and it exposed me to commercial real estate development. It didn't teach me anything tactically, but it exposed me to the industry and provided me with a network of folks to network with. So I'm like, okay, cool. I can help people, which was number one. That's why I wanted to be a doctor. I had autonomy of my time, which was really, really important. That's why I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I could create wealth for myself, my friends, and my family. I'm like, yes, this is what I want to do, bar none. So I just started networking, and started putting the pieces really to a puzzle together on how these developments really come to fruition. When I say real estate developer, most people on the call have no clue what I'm talking about or what I really do. I'm not the general contractor. I don't build the buildings. I'm not the architect. I don't design the buildings. I'm the person that has the vision for underutilized land and brings everyone together to be able to execute upon that vision. So I hire the contractor to build it. I hire the architect to create the design that I have in my head. I give them the program and they create the design, and we work together to edit that. I hire all of the engineers, right? Civil, engineers, environmental engineers, structural engineers, geotechnical engineers. I hire all of the engineers to make sure that this building is really built to last and up to par with basic codes and standards and above and beyond that, right? I think most people probably saw the building that fell over in Florida a couple months ago, and that's one of my biggest nightmares, right? Like, how do you ethically move and build something that is not structurally stable, right? And people lose their lives and family lose their lives, and that's not really good. So I took a lot of pride in understanding all aspects of the development process so I can create the things that I had going on in my brain and bringing them to fruition, which ultimately is what an entrepreneur does, right? So I'm like, by profession, an entrepreneur, because I'm just creating these things out of my brain and making them come, which a lot of engineers do as well. So fast forward, I ended up getting a job at the bank, making $23,000 a month out of college, just as a personal banker. And I'm like, yo, I can't do this full time. This is not for me. So ended up purchasing a 4-unit. I took that 4-unit and the income that I made from it, I replaced my $23,000 a month salary, because post-tax, I was making like $1,500 a month. So when I bought the 4-unit, it was $85,000. I put like $5,000 down, and it was paying me $1,500 a month because the rents were $2,400 a piece, really $2,500 a piece, and my mortgage was about $1,000. So I'm like, okay, cool. I could just take this 15, be free, meet with all these people, learn how to be an entrepreneur, and learn how to be a developer. Reality started to sit in because people weren't paying the rent on time. I didn't properly underwrite for reserves, repairs, maintenance, etc. So I learned the real estate business firsthand through that first 4-unit. But my ultimate goal was just to develop. And I really wanted to start off developing affordable housing because I wanted to build things for people that may not have been able to do it for themselves. That was truly what I wanted to do it for, and still do it for. So fast forward a little bit, I ended up getting the opportunity to take a job with Community Reinvestment Fund and Forward Community Investments, being a regional director of business development. So I was doing community-based lending and providing loans to companies that were mission-based, that couldn't get it from traditional banks. I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool. Like, I could learn finance, I could see the underwriting committees and see what they're doing on the back end. So when I bring my deals, I know what they're looking for. Did that for 2 years, and all while I'm doing this, I took the program in 2010. I got my first development in 2016, so it took 6 years. I worked for that company. I worked for PNC from 2011 to 13. Then I worked for that company. I took the time off, and I was an entrepreneur. But then I went back, and I took that job from 14 to 16, September 14 to September 16. And in September 16, that was the first time I was the second time I was out on my own as an entrepreneur, but this time I wasn't looking back. So I had to create, a way to service my debts and keep my debts really, really low. And it was a difficult point in time in my life because I had this development project. It wasn't going as planned. All of the economics changed. I swapped out my development partner that tried to take advantage of me at the time, got a new one in. All of my cost increased. All of my sources kind of decreased. We can unpack that for Q&A later, but ultimately I had this $12.5 million project with a $3 million gap. And again, just a few years prior, I was only making $24,000 a month. So yeah, I had to figure all of it out. And fortunately I did. To date, I've developed about a little under 500 units, a little over $100 million in total development through rural enterprises. And my pipeline is just north of like 500 million right now. So yeah, I'm in a really good spot for that company. And I felt it was important to really position myself to learn all aspects of that business at the time. It was kind of out of necessity too, because I didn't have the money to hire staff. I'm the only full-time person for all of that $100 million to date. But that's changing this year because I'm not doing this no more. But yeah, I was in the trenches, man. I learned all aspects of the business, and it put me in a really, really good position to think about growth strategy and how I want to, create and build this team. All while I'm doing that, I'm like, yo, affordable housing is cool, but I just don't want to be an affordable housing developer. I want to develop skyscrapers. I want to develop, resorts and retreats and office buildings and all these things. So as I'm doing these affordable housing developments, I'm meeting people that are doing all different types of real estate. And just so you all have context, like the way that I like to separate the two, which is handed down from now mentor Maya Egber-Perry, community development is what I was doing before, right? So like mission-based things, a required subsidy. It was very like big M mission, but small P profit. And commercial real estate is what you see, the big shiny downtown buildings, skyscrapers, et cetera. Zero mission for the most part with a big P profit. And learning both of those things was really something that I took a lot of pride in and figuring out how to work in a community development spectrum and still be mission oriented, but also look at how commercial real estate is done and maximize profit as social impact or mission oriented capitalist, if you will. I don't really like the terms, but that's effectively how I'm running my enterprise. So all while I'm doing all of this, it's like, okay, cool. I was able to develop all of this, but no one could develop with me. And I built this entrepreneurial company, but I didn't really share how that was built. So I have a quote kind of in the second bullet point, right? I truly believe everyone should have ownership, but I don't think that everyone should be an entrepreneur. I think those two things are completely different. And you just got to figure out where you want to be in that kind of spectrum, if you will. So I created a company called The Rosa Grew, which is really a media company and agency that is providing content around entrepreneurship. And I started and stopped a few times, but I'm officially launching by April 1st. You'll see my podcast drop with a bunch of different, there's a membership community around entrepreneurship, and that's what we're doing there. And then I'm also launching Reinvest. So Reinvest is RE-Invest, stands for real estate investing, and also reinvesting in your community. And what we're doing there is providing access to ownership opportunity for anyone that's looking to invest in real estate, aggregating those dollars from people that are putting the money in and placing them with mission-oriented developers that what I realized they have a capital shortfall because access to capital is a challenge. So those are the companies that I have: Rural Enterprises, The Rosa Grew, and Reinvest primarily. And I've been able to really understand entrepreneurship from these entrepreneurial journeys that have started and stopped and progressively grew throughout that entire time. So I want to touch on 3 points there. I kind of started to touch on the second one. That's my story and the context and the framing behind why I'm talking about idea to launch, right? That's my story. But I think these 3 points will then help me frame what you should be considering when as it relates to idea to launching, as it relates to entrepreneurship. So an entrepreneur and a leader, those are similar things, but they are not the same. You can be a leader without being an entrepreneur. The best entrepreneurs are very good leaders. But some entrepreneurs, which also a new term has come, solopreneurs, which is kind of what I've been to date, don't require as much leadership from a company perspective because you're kind of managing yourself or you're doing it all on your own. As you grow and scale, leadership is very important for entrepreneurship because as you grow this company and you are at the helm of that company, you need to be able to move people in the way that they need to be moved around a common and uniform theme or North Star, if you will. Somebody has their, somebody mute that would be good. I hear some background.
I got him.
All right, cool. Yep, so entrepreneurs are people that, in my opinion, are people that are running and creating businesses and have the fiduciary responsibility for that company and the things in which that company does. So I skipped over this. I opened a restaurant bar lounge in Washington, DC. And we were open for a few years. It was a great vibe. It was called the Cage Bird. And I was an entrepreneur. I have a few other partners, really one other partner that I would consider entrepreneur. The rest, they were kind of owners. They weren't necessarily entrepreneurs. But really myself and one other had the fiduciary responsibility for that business. So all of the guarantees, all of, you know, payroll, right? Like payroll fell on me. I had to not pay myself because I had to pay for payroll. I took money from my real estate business to fund payroll in this, you know, kind of restaurant, bar, lounge. So entrepreneur, you have that fiduciary responsibility, and it's tough. And that's why I think everyone shouldn't be an entrepreneur, because you need intestinal fortitude. You're gonna deal with problems. As an entrepreneur, all you're really doing is solving problems every single day. And new problems will arise, and you got to be a critical and creative thinker of how to solve for those problems. And you at the helm, you have to be a leader and move people in that right direction. So those things I think are very, very integral, but then also building out that team is super, super important. I didn't build out the right team for my restaurant, bar, lounge. That industry is very difficult. You got to understand your space. You got to understand where your competitors are, how much they're paying them, how much you're paying them, what is your value proposition and your competitive advantage as an entrepreneur, as a business, to be able to get talent. One thing that, again, Egbert Perry told me that I'm never going to forget, that I want to share with you all. He said this, he said, A talent can attract A talent. He's like, you're A talent, so you need to attract A talent. Everyone on the call may be A talent at a certain point in time, maybe A talent today, or may never really be the A talent to be that entrepreneur, be that leader, and that's okay. A talent attracts A talent. B talent can attract A talent, but it can only maintain B talent. C talent can attract A talent, but it can attract B talent, but it can't maintain A or B talent. It can only maintain C talent. So if you're A talent, you should make sure that you only have A talent around you. So when you're thinking about the importance of a team, it really is surrounding yourself with the best people that are critical thinkers and being able to execute upon a uniform vision, which is the mission statement or vision statement that your company or your entrepreneurial endeavor is embarking upon. So I think those things are really, really important. I know I said a mouthful and I really like more of a Q&A interactive piece, but I wanted to give you the framework for what I've done to date, how I'm thinking about entrepreneurship, how I'm thinking about leadership, how I'm thinking about ownership, and how those things are not synonyms necessarily. There's some overlap, but they're not necessarily one and the same. And the importance of the team is very, very important. And identifying talent is super, super important for your long-term strategic growth and strategy. So I think that first 30 minutes, I wanted to just go and do an intro, like, hey, this is who I am. And these are the things that I would consider, I guess, the last piece that I'll put on that, specifically from idea to launch. When you have an idea, more often times than not, folks are like, yo, I got an idea. I think this would be really cool. And then you see someone else take your idea and run with it, and you feel a way about that, right? It's like, ideas don't really mean anything. Ideas, they're just ideas. They're empty statements. You know, execution is where the value lies. Being able to execute on that idea, having the foresight to say, hey, this is the best way to go about the execution of that idea. And launching, right? When you launch any business, you really, B2C businesses in particular, right? You should have an MVP, a minimum viable product in the tech space. If you have something, no, even B2B. So in tech, because a lot of the background here is engineers. When you're in tech, MVP is super important. You can have a company that your North Star is, hey, I want it to have all of these bells and the whistles, and it potentially operates. Let's use an Uber, for example. Let's use literally Uber. They may have thought of Uber Eats when they launched, but it didn't make sense for them to launch that at that time. They had to gain traction. They had to build proof of concept. They had to go in that direction. So their MVP was a very, very simple mapping tool that provided people to connect really where they wanted to go to drivers that were willing to take them there. Now they have Uber Eats. Now they have, you know, timed rides and pickups. Now they have Uber X and Black and all of these different bells and whistles. But when they started, they had an MVP. So it's important to develop an MVP first prove concept, gain traction, and then iterate based off of that, and really have a kind of research team, R&D team, to be able to think through those secondary, third, fourth iterations of your business, to make sure that the direction in which you're planning to go is the direction that you should go. And R&D could be you. It can be someone on your team to do that work as well, but it's important as it relates to technology and building a business in that space. So there's different sectors. Restaurant business is different from tech. Restaurant doesn't necessarily have an MVP per se, but you can limit the amount of dishes that you have on your food menu or your drink menu. And that could be considered your minimum viable product for a restaurant type of business, right? So I see a couple of questions in there. I know I gave you guys a lot. Devin, would you want me to go through these questions independently? Do you want them to come off of you to ask them? What are your thoughts on the rest of the flow?
Yeah, so we'll make the rest of this time for Q&A. You should be able to unmute yourselves now because I took away that feature for a little bit there. So yeah, we'll let people, if you're willing to, come off mute. You can even turn your camera on. You're not required to, but we want to make this as interactive as possible. So I'll allow you to come off mute and ask your questions. I know Russell, I know you're part of the team. So I'll jump down to, I hope I'm saying your name right. Is that Nathia? Correct me if I'm wrong when you ask your question, but I'll allow you all to come off mute, ask your questions, and engage with Brandon.
Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity to pick your brains. I think what I hear most is always issues in terms of access to capital. What would your advice be in terms of how budding entrepreneurs can actually start to look into where they can access that and, I guess, educate themselves better?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say I would segment it into 3 different buckets. All capital isn't created equal, and all of it doesn't necessarily cost the same. So the first bucket is equity capital, right? So you're selling a piece of your business in exchange for a capitalization into your business. That's typically the most expensive capital that you can find, equity capital. And it's the most risky for that investor, if you will. The way that equity capital is exchanged is, there's a few different ways, right? So SEC has a couple different regulatory exemptions, because when you're selling equity, it's essentially a security if they're not investing in your business and an integral part of your business. So Regulation D through the SEC is the traditional form of equity capital being shared. That requires capital coming from accredited investors. So people making more than 200,000 or have $1 million in net worth outside of their home. They're changing their Reg D or accredited investor definition, or just changed it. So it's slightly different, but that's historically been the case. As of 2012, Obama passed the Jobs Act, Jumpstart Our Business Act, which allow for equity crowdfunding through non-accredited investors. And there's 2 regulations there. There's Regulation A+, which is you can raise up to 75 million. It previously was 50. Then there's Regulation CF, which you can raise up to 5 million, which was previously 1 million, a little over 1 million. So those ways you can do a crowdfunding type of equity campaign and sell a piece of your business through the crowdfund. The next way is debt. When I worked for the 2 CDFIs, I was doing debt lending and community-based mission impact lending. That is a lot cheaper than equity, because if your company does well and you're able to exit at any point in time, you get to own that profit from that exit, right? You don't have to share that with anyone. The debt just needs to be repaid at whatever interest rate in which it's borrowed at and within whatever term in which it's given. Value of equity is that it doesn't require a monthly payment necessarily. The value of debt is that it does, or the value of debt is that it's cheaper, but it does require servicing of that debt. So when you hear debt service or DCR, right, that is what that is measuring, right? What is your overall income versus post expenses versus the debt in which you are borrowing from, and how much debt can you actually afford based on the income in which you have. So debt is difficult, but all of them are difficult in their own ways, but that's possible. And then the last bucket is kind of grants and charitable donations. So you have other crowdfunding companies that are not equity crowdfunding companies that you, in exchange for them giving you money, you don't give them equity, you give them like a gift or something like that, right? Like you give them a t-shirt or something along those lines. Or if there's a, you know, the city of X, and so your city here has a grant program where they're providing up to $50,000 for small businesses that are doing X, Y, and Z. That is grant capital that does not necessarily need to be repaid. That does not necessarily need to have equity dilution, which is important, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a monthly interest rate tied to that capital at all. So the grant capital is the best capital you can find. It's probably the most competitive capital, and why people tend to build their business in a nonprofit space, because you're able to attract more of that grant capital. But even if you're doing a nonprofit, I think you shouldn't, and no business should be dependent upon charitable donations to be sustainable. You should try to create a sustainable business. So to summarize, equity, debt, and grants are the three things that you should consider when you're looking at how to be capitalized in your business.
All right. See, Jordan Taylor has a question. You want to ask that question, Jordan?
Hey, what's going on, Brandon?
What's going on? How you doing?
Pretty good. Appreciate you for taking the time out. Just wanted to touch, you had mentioned the mental aspect of it, kind of, managing stress and stuff like that. So, how do you personally manage it? You're dealing with some larger projects, couple zeros on the end of those. And, to some degrees, that can either spell, really good on the back end, but also it can spell disaster. How do you personally manage that type of stress on the solopreneurship? Because one, not necessarily being able to, lean on, let's say, a team as much, it becomes a certain, individual burden you got to carry. And then also, do you price that into your developments or into salary? Secondary question, but.
Yeah, that's a great question. Me personally, it starts with my mindset. Like the mindset of the entrepreneur is so important, right? And even prior to becoming an entrepreneur, like you as a person, how you manage stress is important, because how you manage stress personally is just going to be exacerbated when the business things are there, right? So things in business or outside of business, which frankly become synonymous for me at this point in terms of stress. I just have a very unique view on life, to be honest. I believe in two things. I think everything happens for a reason, and you reap what you sow. So the first thing is like, when negative things happen in my life, I believe that they're supposed to happen, and I look for the lesson within it. It's not really a loss, it's a lesson. So how do I find that lesson within any negative situation that happens to me? And then the second thing, you reap what you sow. I truly believe that what you put out is what you get back. People call it the law of attraction, whatever you want to call it. It's like, if I put good energy out into the universe and I'm doing good things, that's going to come back to me. So when a negative thing happens, it's a lesson for me to learn. And it's really that simple. It's like, okay, well, when negative things happen, cool. I need to learn this lesson. When positive things happen, it's like, cool, that's supposed to happen. Both ways, that's just how I'm wired. That's how I'm cut. Now, to relieve that, like, additional pressure or burden that's on my shoulders, I try to go to the gym. I talk to people occasionally, but I have no expectations, right? Like, I don't put additional things. Like, I don't expect for people to help me. I've never had a mentor in my life up until really within the last year. Never. I've never had nobody help in terms of, hey, this is the direction that you want to go. Let me take my personal time to make sure that you're going to make it there. I've never had that a day in my life. I have my parents supporting things like that, but they're not on the entrepreneurial spectrum or anything like that. So to be dependent upon that is like, I think a lot of people feel you need that. I just don't. So again, it's just my mindset. And he spent a lot of time on Clubhouse talking about different things. And Elon Musk came on one time and he had a quote that I'm gonna never forget. He said, someone asked a question. He said, "Yo, what advice would you give to an entrepreneur like that? Then what advice would you give to motivate an entrepreneur, right?" And his answer was like, "Yo, if you need motivation as an entrepreneur, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur, right? Like some things just aren't necessarily for some people. Again, going back, everyone should have ownership. If one person has the entrepreneurial drive and grit and three people have the capital to be able to back them, you all four should own that business. But everyone shouldn't take on that responsibility of an entrepreneur if you're not wired that way. And it's okay. Like, I think entrepreneurship is sexy, but it's tough, man. It's like, there have been times where my lights got cut off, my refrigerator, all my food went bad. I couldn't buy new food. I had to borrow money, like gas, didn't have gas, couldn't go to meetings, couldn't go to, I mean, that all is a part of my process and my journey, and it's real. And I don't think that everyone should go through that. I know everyone should not go through that. But if you're willing to go through that, then hey, these are the things you should consider. And I think it starts with the mindset and the way you're thinking about things.
Appreciate it, man. Definitely.
No problem.
Looks like we have a hand raised. There's Moisey. Hope I'm not mispronouncing your name.
Good morning. You can call me Mo. How you doing, Mr. Brandon?
What's up, Butch?
Doing good,
I'm getting old, man. I'm getting called Mister. That's crazy.
Nah, I don't know, man. It's just something I just say. But nah, definitely. I pretty much, I watched their interview on EYL on YouTube and stuff like that. That's how I got hip to you. And I've been going through the process. I'm 24 years old. And last year I bought my first multifamily up in Tallahassee. But I had a mentor who, pretty much at the time when I was in Tallahassee, I just moved to Atlanta. But at the time when I was helping him and stuff like that with his side of things of real estate, it was a balance. But of course, I look to, bring value. I do marketing stuff. So when I started switching over to the real estate side of things, I started asking him, hey, can you help me with this, help me with that? But it started feeling like his energy started getting withdrawn or something like that. So I went ahead and I started looking out for other mentors, but I can't find nobody. So I just dived more into books and stuff like Don Peebles. So what would you recommend for me to do? Because I'm really focused on the development side of things, how you're doing. And you motivated me. Like I really watched your whole interview on YouTube. So that's why I really got motivated to go into that direction. So what advice would you give me? I don't have a mentor right now, and I'm a full-time entrepreneur. So I know what you mean when you said you went through the worst things. And I'm just looking for some advice pretty much.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, man. The guy who was your mentor, what was his background in real estate?
He was a broker. He was a real estate developer. He got 15 years of experience.
What did he develop?
Multiple land apartments up in Tallahassee. He's from DC, matter of fact. Christopher Daniels is his name. He's a professor at FAMU, but he's pretty much well known in the area of Tallahassee. So a lot of people know him for real estate, and he did a lot of land development, rehabs, fix and flips. So he do everything all over the place, really. But his specialty is development.
What value did you create for him?
Well, I did a lot, to be honest. Like marketing overall. Like I never went to school. I went to school for physical therapy, but I learned marketing, like just books, YouTube, and everything. So I really got good with that. Became an entrepreneur. So I built his websites, email marketing, SMS, all the whole 9 yards. Well, somebody would charge you probably thousands a month. I did it for free, not because I'm like, well, I just like to exchange value. Like if I do something for you, you don't have to do it for me, but it's just the amount of work I was putting into losing money. I'm spending money on contractors and freelancers to do websites and stuff, even though I don't do it, but I'm focused on helping him the best way possible. So while I'm going broke, he's getting richer, if that makes sense. And I'm like, yo, come on, you got to balance this out. But it was never something I felt like it was an equal exchange. And this past year just taught me a lot about it. So I just been diving into real estate, but I've been looking to jump out there a lot, just more risk stuff. Like my family been telling me, just do it. But, like how you said, you don't need a mentor at the end of the day, but it's always good to have somebody hold your hand.
Yeah, I think it's helpful, right? It's just not necessary. I think those are two different things. You got to make sure it's like, if you're dependent upon it, that's when it becomes problematic. So the reason why I asked about what are you doing for him is just like, I'm not sure if that's what he would have even wanted from you, right? Like sometimes we give what we have but not necessarily what they need. So for example, right, like the mentor that I have now, again, I've never had one today, but now I got the biggest Black developer in the country. I connected him with one of the largest entertainers in the world through some of my social media stuff, and now they're looking to do some stuff. So that was like value. I partnered with them. I put together an entire proposal for a $250 million development. Mind you, I've never done a $250 million development, but I put it together. I showed it to them. I pitched it on them. It was actually two different ones. And they ended up signing their name on it. A couple months later, we got it awarded. You know, now I just brought them $250 million worth of pipeline. And then I create, like I'm doing this crowdfunding company and they were talking about doing one, et cetera. Hey, no, look at this. Now we're partnering on that, you know, so, and I gave them a very, very healthy percentage of my company. But I think it's worth it, right? And then, you know, through those conversations and through some of the things that we were doing, they then invited me to submit an application with them on a $500 million deal in Atlanta. So now I get to learn their process, and now I can see how they did it. I just wanted $250 million one with my process and just me and my small, like, helping support tab. But now they brought their whole team, full hands, all hands on deck onto that proposal, man. It was crazy. So I saw that whole thing, and in my mind, I'm like, I got work to do. You know, I'm nowhere near where I need to be. If I ever put out anything like I did with that previous proposal, then it's a disservice to myself, right? Like, I need to be better. So what I'm doing now is going back through all our emails, looking at the timeline, et cetera, and creating a whole SOP for the project management process that we went through, like, of responding to this RFP, right? So when I say, and now I'm giving this to them, it's like, I know we did this ad hoc, but here, look at this whole process. This is, you know, kind of what we did. I'm summarizing it. Oh, shoot, okay. Well, you should edit this, move that, change this. Now it becomes a governing document for me and my company moving forward to make sure that I got everything I need to be able to respond to these things. But now it also is for them too. So the reason why I asked that question is, like, sometimes we give what we have, and that's cool, but we might have to do an extra step of figuring out what they need that they might not even know that they need, right? Like, maybe in some of his broker stuff, maybe marketing materials are needed, but I'm sure his brokerage probably does a lot of that. Or, you know, maybe his personal website, whatever the case may be, like, creating that value for what they need and making sure that they understand your value. I think that then gets them to exchange a little bit more to you, just in general. It's not even just for you and your concept. It's just like me giving my example of, like, how I've been able to cultivate this this mentorship through the work that I've kind of put in to show, like, yo, I'm here, I'm willing, I'm learning, and I'm, you know, they say things, I pick it up, cool, all of that's fine. Specific advice as it relates to development, I think there's a couple programs. Like, so many people say, oh, you need to start off in development by, you know, start slow, like get a house and fix and flip it or something. Like, that's who, you know what I'm saying? I think that's always my question back. Like, so many people that are not in development tell me how to get in development. It's like, who did you hear that from? Somebody that's not a developer? Like, that doesn't make sense to take advice from someone that is not doing specifically in real estate development work. So to do that, I think there's a couple courses, couple programs more specifically. There's no linear way to get into it. You can't go to school for it. You can't do anything for it. I talked about that even on the video that you watched. So unfortunately, my profession is very, very difficult. I've taught it top 5. I'm on the board of Virginia Tech Real Estate Advisory Board. I'm on the board of Marquette University's Real Estate Advisory Board. I spoke at University of Wisconsin. I spoke at Georgetown. These are, like, literally the top 5 programs in real estate that all are creating development arms within their institutions. And they're going in and telling their students, 4-year students, as well as their MBA students, don't come here and graduate from this program and think you're going to become a developer. So you're going there and learning how to do real estate for 4 straight years or 6 straight years and still not coming out and becoming a developer. I just want to level set and say, like, if the best institutions aren't able to produce a pipeline or a linear path to development, then it just isn't. There just isn't a way. So there's different ways. Mine was lending and finance. You could start off in construction. You could start off in architecture. You could start out in appraisals. Like, there are many different ways to get into it, but I'll say learn the basics and fundamentals of real estate investing. Learn the different strategies of real estate investing. If I say core plus, value added, opportunistic, you may have no clue what I'm talking about, but everything development wise is an opportunistic development strategy. That's just an opportunistic real estate investing strategy. So many people know value add by ad hoc. It's like, oh, I'm fixing and flipping, but no, that's a true actual strategy in real estate. So I would learn the principles of, or the fundamentals of real estate investing, and then layer on top of that some of the development principles that could be taught. I'm launching a program later in the year, but Acre program in Milwaukee has a high level program. Harbor Bank of Baltimore, I know somebody from DMV in Baltimore has a program. Capital Impact Partners has a program in the DMV in Detroit. REAP, R-E-A-P, real estate. REAP, I forgot what it stands for. They have a program that's national. And all of those programs teach you high level about development. So I would say start there.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
Russell, I know you have dropped a few questions in the chat. Did you want to bring a few of those up?
Got me going back in history now at this point. Actually, I see one of our other guests has a question, so I will hold.
All right. Sounds good. Well, let's go to you, Jay, I believe it is.
Jai.
Jai, got it.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Jai Huntley. I'm a recent graduate from Hampton University, and I own my business where I specialize in sororities and fraternities. And I would say my business started off as like a hobby. Then it turned into like a side hustle and now like a small business. But with that, I didn't necessarily realize what skills I kind of needed to, be successful. So one thing I've been working on is like time management and I guess communication. But Brandon, I was just wondering, what were some of the skills you maybe thought you were good at that as time went on, you pretty much felt like you actually needed to improve on? And I would say, like, how did you improve on it, if you want to expound on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's see. Time management. There were actually things that I thought I was good at that I wasn't as good at, but then things that thought I wasn't as good at that I was actually better at. But I think really organization and time management, I thought I was good, but I had to really, really get better at that. Picking and choosing, more specifically, prioritizing the things that are really more important, right? Like if you come in entrepreneurship and have this checklist and like, oh, I need to get everything on my checklist done. I can't do anything else until I get that checklist done. You're gonna probably be in trouble because, the checklist is important for sure, but there's gonna be a fire and you gotta be nimble and you gotta put it out when it's there, right? So understanding that everything isn't as boxed up as you would like trying to create a box as much as you possibly can, but also giving yourself grace to go outside of that box a little bit to make sure that things are still moving forward for the greater good of the company. Like that's what I mean by time management and prioritization is something that I had to work on. What else? I think finance, numbers and finance, right? I thought like, oh, I had some experience in banking and stuff like that. Like, oh, I know how to do this. But there's many, many levels to it, right? So I tell people all the time, like, understanding the language of finance is important. But doing it on a third grade level is a lot different from, PhD level. So what does that look like? Everything in between. How do you hone in on that craft daily? And then I think applicable for you and anyone else that's an entrepreneur is like, hey, how do you identify those elements that, again, I think I'm good at, but maybe not at the level in which I'm currently performing, right? Like I was good when I was in junior varsity. I was, okay, now I'm in varsity. I was good when I was in varsity. Okay, now I'm in college. I was good when I was in college, but now I'm in the pros. What you were doing at junior varsity, you may have been good at. You may have been a great shooter in high school, but Steph Curry is in the NBA. So if that's not a barometer, right, you have to then make that your North Star. So I don't know if that fully answered the question. You can feel free to re-ask it if I missed it, but those are kind of my thoughts around it.
You did. And I do have a follow-up question because I know a lot of people struggle with this one, but how do you give yourself grace?
Yeah, I think Gary Vee has this term, right? He says micro speed, but macro patience, right? So like day to day, I'm in the trenches. You know what I mean? Every day, it's like a whirlwind. Making sure that I'm doing the checklist stuff, the outside of checklist stuff. I'm trying to move this forward. Like I'm pounding every single day. But then sometimes I get tired. You know, last week, Monday, I think it was President's Day or something like that. And I didn't have anything on my agenda and my schedule. And I've been working hard for really years. I've been sprinting for years. I said, you know what? I'm gonna take a moment to myself. And I just like, I woke up at like 10 a.m. I went to the gym. I didn't even start working until like 12:30. And it's President's Day. So people are probably thinking like, you're supposed to be off that day anyway. But that's just how I'm wired. It's like when my body tells me, like I was thinking about going and doing certain things, but I'm wired to like, yo, my body is telling me I need to relax, so I just need to relax. So again, getting back to micro speed, every day I'm pounding the pavement. But then you got to look at it from a macro perspective, right? It's like, it's gonna take time to get to where you want to be. That's just the reality, right? You're not gonna become a millionaire overnight. You're not gonna become a billionaire overnight. You're not gonna be the most impactful company overnight. That's gonna take time. So I give myself grace by having that perspective. It's like, yo, it's gonna take time. As long as I'm doing day to day what I need to be doing to get me there, cool. I'm cool with the results.
Thank you. And then I do have one more question, and then I'll leave you alone. Do you feel like you treat yourself at this point?
Yeah, occasionally, yeah. I make exceptions. You know, I might treat myself to a nice dinner, or I might treat myself to a nice watch, or I might treat myself to a nice trip. Yeah, I pick my spots. I pick my spots within reason, but not as much as I could. Nowhere near as much as I could. No.
Okay, understood. Well, I thank you and appreciate you for spending time with us.
Of course. Alexander.
Yep, Alexander, we'll end with your question.
Okay, great. Hey, can everybody hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay. Awesome. So thank you so much, Brandon, for all the knowledge you've dropped on us so far. I see that you have a pretty iterative process when it comes to anything you've been talking about today. I'm curious, from when you first started your journey to right now, you know, as an entrepreneur, you have to get people to do things for you once in a while. So what is your leadership style, and has it changed since you first started your venture?
Oh yeah, for sure it has. My leadership style is lead by doing. You know, it's like, okay, cool. I'm gonna get it done by any means necessary. Even when I opened a restaurant, I mean, I was doing, yeah, I owned it, but I was cleaning the gutters out and washing the dishes and cleaning the bathrooms. Like, there was nothing that I won't be willing to do for my company and show. Like, I'm not above anything. I think a true leader can walk with the people, does walk with the people. So that's my leadership style. But I'll say sometimes it bites me because it's like, oh, somebody didn't get that done. I got to pick up the slack. All right, bet, I'm gonna just get it done. But in reality, when you're scaling, you can't necessarily do that, right? So you got to think through ways to get people motivated. You got to think through ways to get people to do what you need them done, or get them out, right? And one of the things a good friend of mine mentioned, he said, you got to be cool with 80% of yourself, because I'm super critical on myself. Like, I'm like, yo, everything got to be pristine, whatever. But everybody doesn't have that same value for my company as I do. So if they're providing 80% of what I would, then I'm cool with that. You know, anything less than that, then I kind of have an issue, because like, this is at the this is a disservice to the role, which is a disservice to the company, which is a disservice to the people. All of my companies, just to bring it all full circle, are all rooted in impact. That's it. You know, it's not about me. So that's what keeps me driving every day. That's what keeps me going every day. And my leadership style is to show like, yo, okay, cool. This is the vision. This is where we rolling. And this is what I'm willing to do to get there, anything. And I try to surround myself with people that may not necessarily do anything to get there, but definitely have a uniform vision and hopefully have some creative thinking ability to be able to execute upon challenges when they exist. Otherwise, I got to come and put out every fire, which again, from a scalability perspective, is sustainable.
Very cool, very cool. Sounds like a mix of servant leadership and pace setting. So very cool. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Thank you all for all the great questions. Thank you, Brandon, for sharing with us today. And I'll turn it back to you to give any closing thoughts you may have. Again, I want to remind you all that this is the beginning of a full program that we're launching between BDPA and NSBE. So if you look at the chat, Chris Small has just dropped the link if you want to register for that overall program. And again, be a part of the ongoing coaching we'll have, and more things that get you moving closer to that launch aspect of the business process. So check that out if you're interested. We'll have more of these talks coming up. We're planning for our next one to be March 17th. So more details will be coming out around that soon. If you've registered, you'll definitely get our emails. If you're in our organizations, you'll get our emails. Be following the social media pages. Also, I want to encourage everyone to go, if you've heard of Earn Your Leisure, look up Earn Your Leisure, Brandon Rule on YouTube. Phenomenal interview. I actually went back and watched it yesterday. Meant to text you that, but forgot. But phenomenal interview, and I'm not just saying that because I know him. So definitely check that out. But Brandon, I'll turn it over to you if you have any closing thoughts for us before we wrap.
Yeah, let's see. So I'm launching my own podcast. I'm going around and interviewing people, and it should be impactful. And I'm creating a membership community around that, right? An entrepreneurship community, because so many times people feel like they're in isolation. So you can follow me on any other platform, B_RULE on everything. I'm not the most accessible person. I'll say that right now. I'm gonna make it very, very clear. Devin is one of my best friends on this earth. And I don't text him back all the time. I don't text my mom back all the time. So I make it very clear, I do not do the text messaging thing very well. I have 1,536 unread texts right now on my current inbox. Does not include my community or any of my email or anything like that. So not the most accessible, but in the moments in which you can get me like this, you got me 100%. And I think that's what matters. So creating that membership community so I can bring people together, so we could talk and share resources with one another. And that's probably the best place you're going to be able to find me. And then, Reinvest is launching soon too. So I'm not a big marketer pusher person for the stuff that I'm doing, but I think it is important from an entrepreneurship cultivation and from an ownership perspective. Those two companies are really for the people. So I wanted to share.
Man, you struck some nerves with the text message comment.
My bad, bro. My bad.
Oh man, I'm just looking at the chat. Well, thank you again, Brandon, for sharing with us. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. We will make the recording available to you all. I'm thinking we'll get it on YouTube somehow, some way. I know we have a BDPA channel, and I'm sure we'll figure out something between NSBE and I think Brandon has a channel as well. So we'll make sure it's accessible to you. If you joined the call, we have your email, so we can definitely get it to you. So be on the lookout for more to come. Thank you all. Hope you enjoyed it and found this valuable. And we'll see you next time. Stay blessed, stay safe.
Thank you all for joining.